Welcome back, my weirdlings. We have stepped into quarter 3 of Raven's Lorecast, the season of stewardship. If quarter 1 was about remembering where we came from, and quarter 2 was about crossing thresholds into becoming, quarter 3 is about responsibility, about what happens after the awakening, about tending what we've built, holding what we've learned, choosing who we become when no one is watching. This is the season of sovereignty, of discernment, of craft, of devotion. Not because perfection is required, but because power means something different once we understand its consequences. So wherever you're listening from, kitchen, car, porch, workplace, walking trail, or beneath the stars, I'm glad you're here, because this quarter, we are not chasing transformation. We are learning how to carry it. All right, my weirdlings, let's begin. Listen, not for something loud, not for something obvious. Listen for what almost escapes you. There's a sound most people ignore. A soft movement beneath the floorboards, a faint shift in the walls, a presence just outside the edge of attention. And we are taught very early to dismiss it, to call it nuisance, to call it problem, to call it something to be removed. But witches? Witches learn differently. We learn that what hides is not always harmless, but it is always meaningful, because power does not always arrive with wings. It does not always perch on your shoulder like a raven, offering you vision. It does not always curl itself around your ankles like a cat, teaching you sovereignty. It does not always stand beside you like a dog, steady and loyal, guarding what you love. Sometimes power arrives small, uninvited, uncelebrated, unapologetically alive. It moves where it is not wanted. It survives where it is not supported. It feeds on what others discard, and still finds a way to continue. And that is a different kind of magic. Not the magic of transformation, not the magic of transcendence, but the magic that refuses extinction. Every witch has known this magic, whether you name it or not. The moment you kept going when no one saw you, the moment you adapted instead of breaking, the moment you made something out of nothing because there was no other choice. That is the current we step into tonight. Not the beautiful, not the elevated, but the enduring. So before we begin, take a breath, my weird ones. Let the room settle. Let your senses widen just enough to notice what usually goes unseen. Because tonight, we are not calling in something new. We are recognizing something that has always been there. The familiar that does not announce itself. The teacher that does not ask permission. The small, relentless intelligence that survives in the dark and remembers every path it has ever taken. Tonight, we speak of the rodent. And if that makes you uncomfortable, good. That means we're close to something real. Because this is where the lesson begins. Not in what you admire, but in what you've been taught to reject. Come with me. Let's go where the world doesn't like to look. Every creature that walks beside a witch tells a story about survival. The raven teaches us to see, to witness what others refuse, to carry messages between worlds without losing ourselves in either. The cat teaches sovereignty, how to belong to no one and still be deeply bonded, how to walk away without apology. The dog teaches devotion, the sacred loyalty of staying, of guarding what matters, of loving without calculation. And then there is the rodent. No mythic wings, no velvet grace, no noble posture, just teeth, just instinct, just a body built for survival in places no one wants to look. And that's exactly why it matters. The rodent teaches something far less romantic and far more necessary. It teaches what it means to live inside the world's blind spots, to thrive where you are not welcomed, to build where you are not seen, to survive on what others discard and still, somehow, multiply. There's a reason witches and rodents have been paired together for centuries. Not because we are alike in form, but because we are alike in function. We move through systems that were not built for us, and we find ways to live anyway. Let's go back. Before plague, before persecution, before the word rat became an insult whispered through clenched teeth. Before all of that, they were sacred. The earliest records of myomancy, divination through the behavior of mice, trace back to ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. And this wasn't fringe practice. This was temple work. Priests observed where mice nested, what they consumed, what they avoided, how they moved when startled. If mice devoured an offering, the gods had accepted it. If they scattered grain, something was coming undone. Think about that. Not lightning, not fire, not thunder, but small movement was enough to signal divine will. Because the ancient world understood something we've forgotten. The gods don't always speak loudly. Sometimes they speak through disruption. The Greeks formalized this relationship. They gave us one of the most fascinating epithets of Apollo, Apollo Smintheus, the mouse god. Apollo, the god of prophecy, music, healing, and plague. Both. Always both. To them, mice were not pests. They were carriers of his dual nature. They brought revelation and consequence, insight and infection, because truth, when ignored, has a way of becoming illness. In the temples of Apollo Smintheus, mice were not exterminated. They were fed. They moved freely across sacred floors, their paths observed, interpreted, respected. Their movement was read like script, not random, never random. But as empires expanded and fear replaced reverence, that relationship changed. The Romans inherited the belief, but stripped it of its sacred context. The mouse was no longer a messenger. It became a warning. And then, eventually, a problem. While the West began to fear the rodent, other cultures remembered. In Norse cosmology, the world tree, Yggdrasil, is a vast, living axis of existence. And along its roots and trunk, creatures move messages between realms, not all of them noble, not all of them revered, but all of them necessary. Among them, small persistent messengers, carrying information between the eagle above and Nithogr, the dragon below. Even at the edge of cosmic collapse, communication continues because knowledge, like a rodent, will always find a way through. In India, we meet something even more striking. The god Ganesh, remover of obstacles, lord of beginnings, rides a mouse, his companion, Mushika. And when questioned, why would a god of such stature choose such a creature? The answer was simple. Because the smallest being can enter where nothing else can. That is the entire philosophy of rodent magic. Access, penetration, persistence. In China, the rat is not feared. It is honored. First in the zodiac, not because it was strongest, but because it was clever. It rode the ox across the river and leapt ahead at the final moment. And because of that, it became a symbol of resourcefulness, adaptability, abundance. Not moral purity, not divine favor, but intelligence applied at the right moment. Perspective shapes mythology, and mythology shapes what we allow ourselves to become. Then came the shift, the one that still echoes, the one that turns survival into accusation. By the 14th century, Europe was in the grip of the Black Death, and fear needed a body. Rats became that body. Though it was fleas that carried the disease, it was the visible creature that took the blame, because humans will always choose a target they can see over a system they cannot. And at the same time, witches were being named, hunted, punished. So the narrative merged, the rat and the witch, both unseen, both multiplying, both surviving systems that tried to eradicate them. The accusations became grotesque, that witches sent rats to spoil crops, to gnaw at sacred bread, to carry disease into homes, that they fed them blood, that they used them as spies. But underneath all of that was something much simpler. Witches lived close to the land, to herbs, to grain, to stored food, and rodents follow food, always. What was natural became sinister. What was survival became evidence. And yet, despite all of it, the rodent did not disappear. It adapted. It went deeper. It learned new routes, new hiding places, new systems, just like the witch. In occult tradition, the rodent familiar is not just a companion, it is a mirror. It represents the parts of you that are not polished, not presentable, not welcome in polite society. The instincts you were taught to suppress, the thoughts you don't say out loud, the survival strategies you developed when no one was helping you. To work with rodent energy is to stop pretending you are above survival. It is to acknowledge you have teeth, you have hunger, you have instinct, and none of that makes you less sacred. In some grimoires, the rodent familiar is described as feeding from the witch's blood, not as horror, but as exchange. Energy given, energy returned. a relationship between conscious self and shadow self. The church called that corruption, but a witch understands you cannot sever yourself from your survival instincts and remain whole. Myomancy never disappeared. It just changed form. Today, you may not be watching temple mice, but you are still observing patterns. Where does your energy go? What gets chewed through in your life? What keeps returning no matter how many times you try to ignore it? Those are your mice. If something keeps appearing in thought, in behavior, in circumstance, it is not random. It is movement, and movement is message. Modern witches often ask, why would I work with rodent energy? Because it shows up when nothing else will. When you are rebuilding, when you are cleaning out your life, when things feel messy, unglamorous, and uncertain. Rodent energy does not arrive when you are shining. It arrives when you are surviving. And it teaches you how to keep going without needing recognition, without needing approval, without needing the world to understand you. Every witch I've ever known carries this. That quiet, clever part that knows where the resources are when everything else runs out. The part that doesn't panic. The part that adapts. That's the familiar. Not something outside you, something within you that never stopped learning how to live. So when something small appears, don't dismiss it. Don't rush to destroy it. Ask, what is this trying to show me about how I survive? Because the rodent does not teach beauty. It teaches continuation. It teaches endurance. It teaches the sacred art of still being here. And in a world that burns through everything, that might be the most powerful magic there is. Tonight, the sky does not announce itself. It doesn't blaze. It doesn't roar. It recedes. And in that quiet withdrawal, it reveals something far more dangerous and far more honest. We are standing under a waning crescent moon, just 2 nights before the new moon. A sliver, a breath, a near disappearance. This is what witches once called the old moon, the phase where light thins enough for truth to move without being seen. By the early hours before dawn, that moon rises low in the eastern sky, barely holding onto its shape. Illumination is minimal, the kind of light that doesn't guide you forward, but instead asks, what have you been carrying that you can no longer afford to keep? This is not a phase of becoming. It is a phase of shedding. And above it, the sun holds steady in Cancer, the sign of home, of ancestry, of memory that clings like damp air to old wood. Cancer does not forget. It stores everything. Every wound, every comfort, every story passed down without language. So tonight, we have a tension, a moon that is letting go and a sun that is holding on. That friction creates something subtle but powerful, emotional excavation. Not the kind that explodes, the kind that seeps. Now let's move beneath the visible sky into the mechanics most people never notice. Tonight, Mercury reaches inferior conjunction. This means Mercury passes directly between the Earth and the Sun, becoming completely invisible to the naked eye. It disappears. Not because it is gone, but because it is too close to the source of light to be seen. And in astrology, this matters because Mercury is not just communication. Mercury is pattern recognition, memory, language, the internal narrator that tells you what things mean. And right now, that voice is not speaking clearly. It is turning inward. This is Mercury retrograde in its deepest expression. Not miscommunication, not chaos, but internal reorganization. Thoughts revisiting old corridors, memories resurfacing without permission, conversations happening inside you that no one else can hear. It is the mind moving like a rodent in the walls, mapping, retracing, finding what was hidden. And we are not done because the sky, like the psyche, has layers. Both Saturn and Neptune are retrograde in Aries. This is rare in tone, if not in timing. Aries wants movement, action, assertion. But Saturn slows, Neptune dissolves. So instead of forward motion, we get a stall, a pause in identity, a questioning of who am I when I'm not pushing? Who am I when I'm not performing strength? Saturn asks for structure. Neptune blurs the edges. Together, they create a moment where you cannot fake your authority. You either know who you are or the illusion starts to crack. And beneath all of this water, shadow, and stillness, there is a single ember, Jupiter in Leo. Quiet but present. A low burning coal of creative fire. Not loud, not performative, but waiting. Reminding you that expression will return, just not yet. Not before the purge. Not before the quiet work is done. Now let's talk about what you can actually see, if you're willing to look. Tonight marks the beginning of the Southern Delta Aquarids and Alpha Capricornid meteor activity. They won't peak yet, but they've begun, which means if you're awake in the deep hours, you might catch one, a slow, bright fireball dragging light across the sky. Not frequent, but deliberate, like the sky is practicing how to break open again. And then there is something even more precise, a detail most people will never notice. The moon will pass in front of the star Beta Tauri El Nath, a lunar occultation. For a brief moment, that star disappears behind the moon. Gone. Not extinguished, just hidden. And this is the entire lesson of tonight's sky. Not everything that disappears is lost. Some things are simply moving behind something else, waiting to emerge again. So what does all of this mean for you? Not in theory, not in abstraction, but in your actual lived human life. Tonight is not for action. It is not for manifestation. It is not for declarations or big beginnings or bold moves. Tonight is for cleaning the corners of your mind, revisiting the stories you thought you were done with, noticing what keeps returning when everything else gets quiet. This is rodent work, small, persistent, unseen. This is the psyche moving through its own architecture, finding weak points, finding hidden stores, finding what still has life left in it. If something feels unclear tonight, good. It's not supposed to be clear. If communication feels slow, good. You are meant to listen more than you speak. If old memories surface, don't rush to fix them. Observe them, track them, follow where they go. Because this is the threshold. 2 nights from now, the new moon will arrive, and with it, choice. But tonight is what comes before choice, the narrowing, the quiet, the almost dark. So step outside if you can, or stand by a window. Let your eyes adjust to the low light. Let yourself feel how little the sky is trying to impress you. And ask yourself, what is still moving in me that no one else can see? Because that is where the real work is happening. Not in the spotlight, not in the performance, but in the small, persistent movements beneath the surface, just like the creatures we have spoken of. The sky is not empty tonight. It's just working in the dark. There's a kind of magic that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shimmer. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't ask to be admired. It waits. In the back of the fridge, in the bottom of the pantry. In the quiet moment when you realize you still have enough to make something work. That's rodent magic. That's survival magic. And tonight, under a waning crescent moon, with Mercury turned inward and the world itself slowing down, this is not a meal for celebration. This is a meal for continuation, for tending what remains, for honoring what endured, for feeding the part of you that kept going when nothing was certain. Tonight's kitchen witchery is simple: a shadow stew and a survivor's bread, not because they are impressive, but because they are enough. Before we begin, rodent wisdom is many things, but it is not unprepared. You do not start building a burrow without knowing what you have to work with, so gather everything first. The shadow stew ingredients: 2 tablespoons olive oil or any cooking oil you have, 1 medium onion roughly chopped, 2 cloves garlic crushed or minced, 1 cup mushrooms sliced, 2 medium carrots chopped, 1 can of 15 ounces or 425 grams beans of your choice, drained and rinsed, 1 cup vegetable scraps. This can be potato peels, celery ends, carrot tops, optional but encouraged, 1 bay leaf, 1/2 teaspoon black pepper, 1 teaspoon salt, but adjust for taste, 4 cups of vegetable broth or water plus 1 tablespoon miso or bouillon. You can add an optional 1/4 cup of red wine and finish with an optional tablespoon of lemon juice or apple cider vinegar. The Survivor's beer bread ingredients: 3 cups gluten-free all-purpose flour blend with xanthan or guar gum included, 1 tablespoon baking powder, 1 teaspoon salt, 3 tablespoons sugar or maple syrup, 1 can, 12 ounces or 355 milliliters gluten-free beer, 2 tablespoons of olive oil or melted plant butter. If you need to substitute, do it. This is not a purity test. This is survival. Let's talk about the ingredient correspondences, or the magic of what remains. Now that everything is in front of you, we can talk about what it means, because magic doesn't live in guessing. It lives in knowing what you're working with. Oil, the keeper of continuity. It carries heat. It prevents burning. It sustains transformation without collapse. Under this waning moon, it reminds us you don't have to rush change. Onion, layered truth, nothing revealed all at once, just like memory under Mercury retrograde, just like the stories we inherit in Cancer season. What haven't you fully seen yet? Garlic, boundary and protection, crushed to release its strength. With identity blurred in the sky right now, garlic asks what is yours and what is not. Mushrooms, the unseen network, life thriving beneath notice, the intelligence that doesn't need recognition. What is growing quietly in you? Carrots, grounded sight, not fantasy, not illusion, reality you can hold in your hands. Rodent wisdom trusts what is real. Beans, sustained life, small, humble, essential, not glamorous, but reliable. You don't need abundance to endure. You need consistency. Scraps and peels are reclamation, the parts we almost threw away. This is shadow work made tangible. Nothing's wasted, nothing is unworthy. Bay leaf is quiet knowing, ancient, subtle prophecy, not loud, not dramatic, just truth waiting to be acknowledged. Salt and pepper, embodiment, taste, sensation, presence, because survival without feeling is not living. Wine, optional courage, softening control, allowing what is. Here's the recipe, or as I like to call it, the act of making. Begin by heating your oil in a large pot over medium heat. Listen. The first sound is quiet, a soft shimmer, not dramatic, just the beginning. Add your chopped onion. Stir occasionally for about 5 to 7 minutes until it softens and becomes translucent. Let it release slowly, no rushing. Add the garlic. Cook for about 1 minute, just until fragrant. This is where the space changes, where intention becomes presence. Add the mushrooms, carrots, beans, and scraps. Stir to coat everything in oil. Let it cook together for 3 to 5 minutes. Not constantly, just enough. Rodent wisdom does not overwork. It adjusts when needed. Pour in the 4 cups of broth. Add bay leaf, salt, and pepper. If using wine, add it now. Bring everything to a gentle boil, then reduce heat to low. Let it simmer uncovered for 30 to 40 minutes. Stir occasionally, not obsessively. Just when it calls to you. Taste. Adjust salt. If it feels flat, add lemon juice or vinegar, because even in shadow, you need something that wakes you up. Now for the survivor's beer bread. While the stew simmers, we make the bread. Preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit or 190 degrees Celsius. Grease or line a loaf pan. In a large bowl, combine the flour, baking powder, salt, and sugar. Whisk gently. Slowly pour in the beer. Let it foam. Let it react. This is fermentation magic. Transformation without force. Stir until just combined. It will be thick. Lumpy is fine. Perfect is not required. Pour into your loaf pan. Smooth the top. Brush with olive oil or melted plant butter. Bake for 40 to 45 minutes until golden and firm. Let cool for at least 10 minutes before serving. This bread does not rise high. It rises enough, and that is its lesson. As the stew simmers and the bread rises. Speak this aloud or within. I make from what remains. I nourish what survives. I release what no longer feeds me. I trust what continues. Let each line settle. This is not manifestation. This is recognition. Eat this meal at twilight or in the quiet before sleep. Turn off overhead lights. Use one candle if you can. Sit. No distractions. Take the first bite slowly. Notice warmth, texture, presence. Between bites, ask, what am I ready to release? What am I holding that no longer nourishes me? What part of me is still quietly surviving? Do not force answers. Let them move like something small in the walls. Because this is the work of the waning crescent, not becoming, but paring down, not expanding, but refining. The rodent familiar does not promise transformation. It promises something harder, continuation. It does not ask if you will rise. It asks if you will remain. This meal, this act of feeding yourself with what was almost discarded, this is the oath, not to shine, not to impress, but to endure. So when the bowl is empty and the house grows quiet, listen, because something in you is still moving, still adapting, still alive. And that is where we leave the kitchen and step into the final truth of this lesson. By now, you understand. This was never just about rodents, not really. Because for some of you, this is about rodents. The ones you've cared for, the ones who chose you, the ones who move through your home, your dreams, your practice, not as pests, but as presence, as companions, as watchers, as teachers in small, breathing form. And for others, this is about what the rodent represents, the part of you that refused to disappear, the part that learned quietly how to adapt, how to move unseen, how to survive in spaces that were never built for you. That is the truth of the witch's familiar. It is never only external. It is never only symbolic. A familiar is a relationship, a living exchange between you and something that reflects your magic back to you in a form you might otherwise overlook. Sometimes it comes with wings, sometimes with claws, sometimes with soft fur and bright watching eyes that see more than you think. And sometimes it lives entirely within you. The instinct that knows when to move, when to hide, when to wait, when to act. The rodent familiar teaches both. For those who walk with them in the physical world, they teach care, attention, subtlety, and respect for life that is often dismissed. They remind you that intelligence does not always look impressive, that presence does not require permission. And for those who meet them in the symbolic or spiritual sense, they teach endurance, adaptation, the sacred art of continuing without recognition. Both are real, both are valid, both are witchcraft. And once you recognize that part of yourself, you begin to understand something deeper. It didn't just survive, it learned, it refined, it became precise in ways comfort never requires. It knows how to move quietly, how to observe, how to survive systems that were never built to hold you. We spend so much of our lives trying to become something greater, something brighter, something more visible, something worthy of recognition. But the rodent familiar asks a different question. What if survival is already sacred? Not glamorous, not celebrated, but sacred. Because survival is not passive. It is not accidental. It is a series of decisions made in moments no one else witnesses. The choice to keep going, the choice to adjust, the choice to find nourishment where there should have been none. That is not weakness. That is intelligence. The kind of intelligence that doesn't need applause. Tonight, you fed that part of yourself. Not the polished version, not the presentable version, but the one that knows how to continue when everything else falls away. You honored it. You listened to it. You gave it space to speak. And now you carry it forward. Not as something separate, not as something beneath you, but as part of your magic. Because the witch who survives is the witch who endures, and the witch who endures outlasts everything. So as this moon disappears into darkness, take something with it. Take the need to be seen. Take the need to be perfect. Take the belief that your power must be beautiful to be real. Let it go. And in its place, keep this. You are allowed to be small and still be powerful. You are allowed to be unseen and still be significant. You are allowed to survive without explanation. Tonight, light one small candle, not to banish the dark, but to sit with it, to recognize what else lives there. And when you hear something shift just beyond your awareness, don't rush to silence it. Listen. Because something in you is still moving, still adapting, still alive. And that is the oath. If tonight stirred something in you, if a story lingered, if a question followed you home, if a truth settled quietly beside you, that's the work. Quarter 3 is about stewardship, about recognizing that wisdom is not what we learn, it's what we choose to do with what we've learned. If you'd like to keep walking beside me between episodes, you can find Raven's Lorecast on Facebook, Blue Sky, TikTok, Threads, and Instagram. That's where the conversation continues. The stories expand and the circle remains open. And if you're called to go a little deeper, Patreon is waiting when the time feels right. No pressure, no obligation, just another seat closer to the fire. Until next time, take good care of what you've been given and take good care of yourself. See you next week, my weirdlings.